Hello everyone, welcome to the civics class. In this video, I'll be continuing with the 6th chapter of class 10th civics, that is political parties. Students, I have already made one video on this chapter in which I have covered the meaning of political parties, its functions, difference between national political parties and regional political parties. Then we have discussed about the national political parties of India. Now in this video, I'll be continuing with the chapter and we'll be discussing about some of the important challenges that these days the political parties are facing. So let's start the topic. Challenges to political parties. All over the world, people express strong dissatisfaction with the failure of political parties to perform their functions well. Popular dissatisfaction and criticism has focused on 4 problem areas in the working of the political parties. Political parties need to face and overcome these challenges in order to remain effective instruments of democracy. As you all know, democracy survives on the basis that citizens elect their representatives. So, in modern democracies, in big nations or small nations, people do require their representatives, and this happens through the process of election. So a healthy competition is required in the field of politics, in which various political parties they contest elections, and it forms the base for the democracy. The first challenge is lack of internal democracy within parties. There is a tendency in political parties towards the concentration of power in one or few leaders at the top. Parties do not keep membership registers, do not hold organizational meetings, and do not conduct internal elections regularly. Ordinary members of the party do not get sufficient information on what happens inside the party. As a result, the leaders assume greater power to make decisions in the name of party. This is a very prominent feature these days in the political parties, that parties does not have internal democracy. So if they do not work democratically, how can we expect them that when they'll come on power, they will work on democratic lines? So it is required that every political party should work democratically. The second challenge is of dynastic succession. It is related with the first one. Since most parties do not practice open and transparent procedures for their functioning, there are very few ways for ordinary workers to rise to the top in a party. Leaders are in a position of unfair advantage to favor people close to them or even their family members. In many parties, the top positions are always controlled by members of one family. This is a very prominent feature these days in Indian political parties. This is also bad democracy, since people do not have adequate experience or popular support come to occupy positions of power. The third challenge is about the growing role of money and muscle power in parties, especially during elections. Since parties are focused only on winning elections, they tend to use shortcuts to win elections. They tend to nominate those candidates who have or raise lots of money. Rich people and companies who give funds to the parties tend to have influence on the policies and decisions of the party. In some cases, parties support criminals who can win elections. This leads to the criminalization of the Indian politics. The fourth challenge is that very often parties do not seem to offer meaningful choice to the voters. In recent years, there has been a decline in the ideological differences among parties in most parts of the world. Sometimes people cannot even elect very different leaders, either because the same set of leaders keeps shifting from one party to another. It means that it leads to the confusion among the voters to elect the leaders, because the party's ideologies are not very different. They have very narrow ideological differences, which leads to confusion among the voters. So, choosing a candidate in election becomes a very painful task for the voters. How can parties be reformed? Some of the recent efforts and suggestions in our country to reform political parties and its leaders are: the constitution was amended to prevent elected MLAs and MPs from changing parties. This was done because many elected representatives were indulging in defection in order to become ministers or for cash rewards. Now, a law says that if any MLA or MP change parties, he or she will lose the seat in the legislature. This law helped bringing defection down. This is the anti-defection law. It means that there was a tendency earlier that the winning MLAs or MPs, they often change their parties. Suppose an MLA or an MP, if wins the election, after winning the election and his party does not gets the majority, then they often change their parties and join the leading party so that they can get the role in the government. They can have a place in the ministries, or they can win the rewards. But this defection is brought down by this new law, which is called anti-defection law. They cannot change their parties after contesting election, and this has reduced the defection in the political system. The Supreme Court passed an order to reduce the influence of money and criminals. Now it is mandatory for every candidate who contests elections to file an affidavit giving details of his property and criminal cases pending against him. The Election Commission passed an order making it necessary for the political parties to hold their organizational elections and file their income tax returns. Now, this step of Supreme Court, if implemented strictly, then it can definitely reduce the criminalization of the Indian politics, as the details of the candidate in an elaborative way, their property, their assets, and any criminal cases pending against them is now a mandatory thing when any candidate files for the nomination. Besides these many suggestions, there are often made to reform political parties, like a law should be made to regulate the internal affairs of political parties. It should be made compulsory for political parties to maintain a registered office, its members to follow its own constitution, to have independent authority, to act to judge in case of party disputes, and to hold open elections to the highest posts. It should be made mandatory for the political parties to give a minimum number of tickets, about 1/3 together, to the women candidates. There should be state funding of elections. The government should give parties money to support their election expenses. This support could be given in kinds like petrol, paper, telephone, etc. People can put pressure on the political parties. This can be done through petitions, publicity, and agitations. Pressure groups and movements and media can play an important role in this. The quality of democracy depends on the degree of public participation. It is difficult to reform politics if ordinary citizens do not take part in it and simply criticize it from the outside. Yes, it is very important that the younger generation, they should take a keen interest in the politics. Reason being, it is required in Indian politics that more and more youth needs to join this with new ideas, new innovations. It is required, and a fair chance or a fair opportunity given to the young leaders to come up in the politics. So people need to be active in the political affairs, and they should raise their voice if any wrong decision is taken. Their involvement is equally important besides government's working. So with this we conclude this chapter, political parties. Thank you for watching this video. Hope you liked this video.